The night my stepson told me I was just my husband's bed warmer, I didn't cry. I stirred the pasta and nodded, like he'd told me something true and boring, and that's when I knew I'd already stopped existing in my own life. I knew he didn't love me the night his son looked me in the eye and called me the bed warmer. We were in the kitchen, waiting for the pasta to boil, and Jordan leaned against the fridge like he owned the house. He was 18, bold in that way boys get when they smell power shifting. He said it like a joke, like it was common knowledge, and then walked out before I could decide whether to scream or pretend it hadn't happened. I stood there, wooden spoon in hand, wondering how long I'd been living with strangers. I didn't bring it up right away. I set the table, served dinner, asked how Nathan's meeting went. He said the client was difficult but promising, then complimented the sauce without really tasting it. Jordan barely looked up from his phone. The three of us sat like actors in a play that had gone on too long, all the lines memorized, none of them honest. That night, I waited until Nathan was asleep, then lay on my back in the dark and whispered the word to myself, bed warmer, just to see how it tasted in my mouth. People always ask if I have kids. I usually smile and say, not yet, even though I stopped hoping years ago. We tried, or at least I did. He said we should wait, said the timing wasn't right, said he didn't want to bring a child into something uncertain. He said it like he was protecting me, but it landed like a warning. After that, I stopped bringing it up. I stopped dreaming in pinks and blues. I stopped imagining a version of myself that anyone would call mother. I became a very quiet kind of empty. I met Nathan when I was 21, working late shifts at a print shop downtown. He came in needing a last-minute proposal printed for a pitch, wearing a suit that fit him too well and a smile that was almost kind. He said I had sharp eyes. I said he had good paper. We started talking, and by the end of that month, I had moved into his apartment. He said I made him feel calm, like he could breathe around me. I didn't realize until much later that what he really meant was that I didn't ask for much. Jordan was already in his life then, a wide-eyed 8-year-old who treated me like a substitute teacher. I brought him snacks, drove him to soccer practice, helped with his math homework when Nathan got tired. He never said thank you, but I told myself that wasn't the point. I was building something. I thought that if I was kind enough, useful enough, patient enough, he'd see me. That Nathan would see me. That someone would. But kindness becomes currency in a house where love is rationed, and I was always overpaying. There were nights I would sit on the edge of the bathtub just to cry without being heard. Not sobbing, just a slow leak of whatever hope I had left. I told myself this was temporary, that once Jordan grew up, once the business stabilized, once Nathan remembered how it used to be, things would change. But the truth is, I was always in waiting. Waiting for someone else's timeline, someone else's approval, someone else's voice to say, you matter here. And it never came. Not once. Not from either of them. When I did finally bring it up, Jordan's words, the tone, the cruelty, Nathan didn't flinch. He said, he's just a teenager, like that explained everything. Then he asked me to keep things peaceful, said Jordan was under a lot of pressure with college applications, said I was probably just reading too much into it. I wanted to say, your son knows you're cheating on me and he's not even hiding it, but I didn't. I nodded. I smiled. I cleaned the dishes like betrayal wasn't hanging in the air between us. That night, while Nathan slept, I opened a blank notebook and wrote down everything I remembered, dates, comments, silences, small wounds I'd buried. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't revenge. It was the beginning of remembering myself clearly, of seeing the shape of what I'd been molded into. I didn't know what I would do yet, but for the first time in years, I felt the quiet burn of clarity. And once you see the truth, even in a whisper, you can't unhear it. Her name was Maylene, though I only ever called her your cousin because that's how Nathan first introduced her, smiling, casual, hand on the small of my back like we were still close. I remember that moment now with a kind of slow-motion clarity, the way she hugged him a little longer than necessary, the way her perfume lingered on his shirt afterward. She laughed too loudly at his jokes, touched his arm when she talked, and called him Nate, which no one else ever did. But I ignored it, like I'd been trained to ignore small betrayals. They had a business together, some niche consulting firm that I didn't understand but was constantly asked to help with. I did their taxes for 3 years, guaranteed a loan when their funding got tight, even sold some of my jewelry when they needed bridge capital during a rough quarter. Nathan said I had the kind of mind they needed: organized, thoughtful, calming. I smiled, grateful to be useful, believing usefulness was close enough to love. That's how women like me stay. We tell ourselves we're helping, even when we're being used as leverage. Looking back, the signs were everywhere, just buried under the busy clutter of keeping things running. She called at strange hours and never apologized for it, used our driveway like it was hers, brought wine to dinners uninvited, and always brought a second toothbrush, just in case she needed to crash. Nathan would wave it off, say, "She's family," and I'd nod because the alternative was asking questions I didn't want honest answers to. Questions like, why does she look at me like I'm in the way? The first time I caught them. Not kissing, not touching, just too close, was in the office above the garage. The door was cracked open, and I was bringing coffee, because that's who I was back then. She was laughing softly, her knees almost touching his, her voice lower than usual. And Nathan looked happy in a way I hadn't seen in years, relaxed in that quiet, easy way men get when they know they're exactly where they want to be. I stood there for a second too long, then walked away like I hadn't seen a thing. Later that night, I asked him if he was happy. I didn't mean it as an accusation, just a threadbare offering. He blinked, surprised, then said, "Why wouldn't I be?" and kissed my forehead. That was the moment I understood something I'd been trying not to see. The kiss wasn't affection, it was dismissal. He didn't want to answer me, he just wanted the conversation to end. So I let it. I let it because I didn't know how to leave someone who hadn't told me I should go. I let it because I still thought love could be repaired. When I hired the investigator, I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because I needed to see it in black and white, not just feel it in my gut. The report came in a plain envelope, photos clipped to the inside like old family memories. 7 years, he said. 7 years of weekends, hotel check-ins, cash withdrawals near Maylene's apartment, business trips that weren't business. My name was never on a single receipt. I stared at the pictures for hours, numb. It wasn't even the cheating that broke me. It was the fact that I had helped fund it. I thought I would cry, but I didn't. Instead, I cleaned the kitchen, washed the sheets, and sent out a reminder email to Maylene about an upcoming payment on the line of credit: polite, professional, neutral. I acted like everything was still okay, because I needed a few more days to figure out where I ended and this marriage began. That's the thing about being useful, you become invisible even to yourself. I stood in front of the mirror that night and tried to see the version of me who once wanted this life, and I couldn't find her. I didn't confront him, not at first. I wanted him to lie to my face one more time, just to make sure I was done. So I asked him how the business was going, and he told me Maylene was struggling, that she'd probably need more help. I smiled, handed him a glass of wine, and said, "We always do what we can for family, right?" He nodded, already thinking about something else. And I realized then, with startling calm, that I was no longer inside this story. I was standing on the edge of it, finally ready to walk away. I started with the accountant I had once used when I tried to start my own event planning business, before I gave it up to focus on Nathan's growing empire. She remembered me immediately, asked if I was back to relaunch, and I smiled through the phone and said something like that. She helped me restructure my finances, reassign assets, and move accounts into a trust under my mother's name. Everything was quiet, clean, and untraceable. I told Nathan I was consolidating for tax season, and he didn't even look up from his laptop. He said, "Good thinking," and went back to typing. I reviewed everything I had ever signed: business loans, property deeds, joint accounts, and slowly began to detach myself from all of it. The house was in his name, but most of the operating expenses came from mine, so I started rerouting payments, delaying renewals, letting some things lapse just long enough to raise eyebrows. When he asked, I shrugged and said our bank's fraud department was causing delays again. He cursed under his breath and kissed my temple like I was the assistant who fixed everything. That kiss made me feel more forgotten than ever. The company I'd helped them build was bleeding quietly. Maylene had started making riskier choices, reaching for expansions they couldn't afford, promising investors too much too soon. They leaned on my credit, my guarantees, my quiet reliability. So I watched the foundation shift beneath them, one late payment at a time. I didn't sabotage them. I just stepped back. I stopped fixing their problems. I stopped reminding them about deadlines. I stopped pretending my silence was agreement. Sometimes letting people fall isn't cruelty, it's just the natural end of a story they wrote without you. The leak was easier than I expected. A confidential document I still had access to, one I'd edited 6 months ago without realizing its future use. I passed it through an anonymous channel to a reporter known for exposing small business scandals, and within a week, the company's name started appearing in forums, then in inboxes, then in the local paper. It wasn't a scandal yet, just discomfort, the kind of discomfort that makes shareholders anxious and meetings longer than they should be. Nathan came home frustrated, said, "Someone's out to get us," and I stirred the soup like I hadn't heard. I bought the stock under a holding company registered to my friend Carla, who owed me a favor from years ago. I transferred funds quietly, timing each move with their public stumbles, waiting for the value to dip just low enough to slide in unnoticed. It felt like watching a tide recede, slow and steady, until the seabed revealed all the rot beneath it. Maylene sent me a panicked email asking if I'd heard from a supplier, said she had a bad feeling. I told her to relax, that these things always passed. I signed it, love always, and meant none of it. The night I told Nathan I wanted a divorce, he looked at me like I had slapped him. He asked why, said he thought we were in a good place. I handed him a folder with everything, the affair, the finances, the proof, and waited for the denial. But he just sat there, shoulders sinking, as if he'd been waiting for this moment too. He said, "So you finally found out," like it was a relief, like the weight had shifted from his chest to mine. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "I'm done carrying all of this." Jordan texted me a week later, asking why his tuition payment hadn't gone through. He said I was being petty, that I was acting like a child. I deleted the message without responding. Then he called, furious, saying I had no right to ruin his life just because I couldn't keep his father happy. I listened until he was out of breath, then blocked the number. I didn't owe him an explanation. I had raised him without gratitude or recognition, and I had nothing left to give. You can love someone and still decide they don't get access to you anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't proud. I was tired. Tired of being the cushion for everyone else's recklessness, tired of being the one who made things okay without being asked how I was doing. I packed slowly, choosing only what belonged to me, the scarf my mother gave me before she passed, the photo album I'd made during the year I thought we might adopt, the journal where I wrote down all the things I couldn't say out loud. And when I closed the door behind me, it didn't feel like an escape. It felt like stepping into the beginning. The silence after the divorce was the loudest thing I'd ever heard, like the hum of a refrigerator after the power's been cut, barely there but constant. The calls stopped first, Nathan, then Maylene, then the board members who used to CC me on everything. I became a ghost in their shared machine, the name erased from footers and group chats. Jordan didn't call until he realized the tuition office had flagged his account. He left me a voice message filled with words I knew he thought would hurt me, but I listened with a stillness I'd earned. He said I was heartless, that I was punishing him for things he didn't do, that I was bitter because I couldn't have kids of my own. It was strange, hearing a boy I once held through a stomach flu talk to me like I was the problem in his life. I deleted the message without finishing it, then pulled up my bank's dashboard and canceled the recurring payment for his phone bill. I hadn't spoken to him in 3 months, but I was still paying for him to text girls and ignore me under my own roof. Maylene tried once, a carefully worded email that read like a customer complaint. She said she was sorry things had ended this way, said she never meant to come between us, said that she hoped I could find healing. It was signed with grace, like she'd forgotten I knew what her handwriting looked like on hotel receipts. I forwarded it to my lawyer and went on with my day. There's a kind of grief that doesn't look like crying, doesn't feel like loss, just floats around your house touching everything you once cared about until it feels unfamiliar. People around me didn't ask questions. They assumed things, of course. That I was recovering, that I must be angry, that I had probably thrown his clothes into the street or cut up his suits like the women in movies. But there was nothing to destroy. He had already taken everything meaningful before I even asked for it back. I kept the dining table because I liked the way it caught the morning light, but sold the chairs. I never liked how cramped they were, always made me feel like I had to sit up straighter than I wanted to. In the evenings, I started cooking for one, something I hadn't done in years. I lit candles even when I was alone, used the good plates, played music that didn't remind me of anyone. I wasn't rebuilding suggests there was something worth salvaging. I was beginning. I answered no one's questions, stopped explaining myself to friends who weren't really friends, and let the quiet stretch long enough to get comfortable inside it. Some nights I missed conversation, but I never missed compromise. There is a difference, and I learned it the first time I chose myself without apology. The neighborhood gossiped in a low murmur, the way people do when they want to feel involved, but not responsible. They wondered why Nathan moved offices so suddenly, why the company filings changed, why Maylene's name disappeared from the LLC. No one asked me directly, but I heard the echoes when I went to the corner store or passed familiar faces on my morning walks. I didn't flinch. If you've ever been invisible while helping build someone else's life, becoming unbothered is a gentle evolution. It doesn't come from bitterness, it comes from exhaustion, and eventually from peace. The only time I cried was when I found the envelope I'd kept under the drawer, the one with the sonogram photo I never showed Nathan. It wasn't far along, and I'd lost it before I could share the news. I had written his name on the back in pencil, just a faint idea of who he might become. I held it like a memory from someone else's life, someone who still believed effort could make people stay. Then I put it in the fireplace and watched it curl into smoke. Some griefs are too personal for altars. I stopped waiting to be missed. I stopped imagining them sitting around a table I used to set, wondering how they'd managed to lose something so steady. People like Nathan don't miss you, they miss the function you served, the way you held things together without needing to be held in return. And Jordan, he would be fine. He'd find someone else to call mom when he needed money, someone who mistook his silence for shyness and offered him grace he hadn't earned. And I, finally, didn't feel responsible for any of it anymore. The townhouse came furnished, but I replaced everything anyway, starting with the bed. I picked one that didn't creak in the night, one I didn't have to share with snoring or silence, one that didn't hold the weight of conversations left unfinished. I chose linens in earth tones, soft but grounded, and I slept without needing to check who else was breathing beside me. I kept the lights on longer than usual those first few nights, not out of fear, just comfort. There was something sacred in deciding how a room felt, without compromise, without someone else's preferences on the walls. I started working part-time with a nonprofit that helped immigrant women transition after divorce, which felt strange at first because I never thought of myself as someone who had survived anything. But sitting across from women with their hands clenched around old paperwork and too many apologies on their lips, I saw myself clearly. I helped them organize bank documents, review court letters, build folders with their names on them like scaffolding. It felt good, doing something that didn't require shrinking. I didn't offer advice, only presence. Sometimes presence is all people need to remember they're still here. On weekends, I walked the long trails behind the nature preserve, where the sound of the city faded into birdsong and wind. I liked the way the air changed the farther I went, how strangers nodded when they passed, but never stopped to ask why I was alone. There's a dignity in solitude that couples forget about. I took pictures of trees and sometimes clouds, never people. I wanted to remember what the world looked like when it wasn't asking anything of me. The quiet didn't press anymore, it unfolded. I stopped missing noise that never meant connection anyway. Occasionally, someone from that past life would send a text, short and cautious, a thinking of you, or hope you're doing well. I always replied with warmth, but didn't invite more. People mean well, but meaning well doesn't erase silence when it mattered. I didn't need apologies, I didn't need explanations. I needed space, and I gave it to myself. That's the thing they don't tell you about starting over. The hardest part isn't leaving, it's choosing not to go back, even when comfort calls your name with familiar hands. Some kinds of comfort aren't worth returning to. The business I'd stepped away from dissolved a few months after I left, quietly, almost without ceremony. A few news articles speculated about mismanagement, about internal disputes, about lost funding. I read them once and never saved the links. Maylene disappeared from the city entirely, or maybe she stayed and learned how to keep a low profile. Nathan moved offices again, smaller this time, less central. I didn't ask anyone about him, but once, at a cafe, I heard someone mention his name, a casual remark about how tired he looked these days. I stirred my coffee and let it pass. I didn't remarry, didn't date much either. I wasn't bitter, I wasn't afraid, I just wasn't searching. There's something beautiful about walking into your own home and knowing every inch of it answers only to you. I danced sometimes, just in the kitchen, barefoot, while something soft played on the speaker. I bought myself flowers on Thursdays, always yellow, always cheap, always enough. I didn't build a new life with urgency, I let it grow slow, like something wild but steady. The kind of life that doesn't need approval or applause, just time and good light. Sometimes people ask if I regret it, the marriage, the years, the effort. I don't lie, I say I don't regret who I was, because she got me here. She stayed too long, she bent too far, she gave too much, but she loved honestly, and that matters. I've stopped trying to rewrite the past into something prettier. It was what it was, a season, a lesson, a room I walked into and then walked out of. That's all. I carry pieces of her still, not as shame, but as stone weight that grounds me, proof that I was always enough. I built my life from the quiet up, like laying brick after brick with my own hands. There were no blueprints, only instinct. I still don't know what comes next, and for the first time, that doesn't scare me. I'm not waiting to be rescued or loved back into shape. I'm not standing in anyone's shadow or asking anyone to stay. I walk through the world like it belongs to me now, and in some small way, it does. What I lost was loud, but what I've found is soft, and it holds. It holds me, and that's enough. If this story moved you or made you reflect on the quiet strength it takes to reclaim your worth, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps bring more powerful, real-life stories like this to the channel, and we'd love to hear what boundaries you've had to set in your own journey.